Okay, today we're going to be talking about quadrilaterals. Now, quadrilaterals are easy and can be complicated all at the same time, and we're going to talk a little bit about why. First of all, quadrilateral is the word quad meaning four. So quadrilateral is a shape with four sides. So there's all sorts of shapes down here that have four sides. We have squares, rectangles, parallelograms, kites, rhombuses, trapezoids, and any other number of strange four-sided shapes that don't fit into that category exactly. Um, this one would be called a chevron. Um, so, there's, as long as it's got four straight sides, it's going to be a quadrilateral. So there's any number of other shapes as well. So let's take a look at these shapes. Now, what I want you to think about here is that while we might call this a square, and we might call this a rectangle, and we might call this a parallelogram, that these shapes, some of them can fit into other categories as well. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today and wanting to focus on is not just what is a square, what is a rectangle, but the fact that some rectangles are squares and all squares are rectangles. Mind blown. And so why is that? So let's look at what makes these shapes these shapes. So we're going to start down over here with a parallelogram, okay? Parallelogram has the word parallel in it, okay? Parallel means two sides that go on and on forever and will never touch. So in a parallelogram, opposite sides are equal and parallel. So you'll see these blue sides here, this blue side and this blue side. If they were to go on and on forever, they would never touch. They're the same length and they are parallel. They are the same distance apart all the way across the shape. And if you draw them on and you continue that line on forever, it's never going to touch this line, at least as long as it stays straight. All right, so now jump over here and we have a rectangle. All right, a rectangle, opposite sides are equal. Hey, just like a parallelogram, and all angles are 90, but just like a parallelogram, both sides are also parallel. So a rectangle has two sets of parallel sides, and because it has two sets of parallel sides, it could be a parallelogram. But it is a parallelogram that has four right angles, which makes it rather special, which makes it a rectangle. Okay, now we're used to seeing rectangles where one side is longer than the other side. But if we had a rectangle where all sides are the same, then we would make what we call a square. So what makes a square more special than a rectangle is in a square, all four sides are exactly the same length. These sides and these sides are still parallel. This side and this side is still parallel, and it still has four right angles. So it is just like a rectangle. So a square could also be called a rectangle, but it's a special rectangle that has four sides that are the same. Which makes me think of this guy over here, which is a rhombus, and we're going to see this on the other page as well. So a rhombus is like a parallelogram that has two sets of parallel sides that never touch, but it also has four sides the same, kind of like a square. But what it does not have, that a square has, is it does not have four right angles. Okay, so these shapes have a lot in common, and that's going to kind of keep coming up as we go through today. Then we have trapezoids. The thing that makes a trapezoid is only two sides are parallel. So for example, in this shape, just the top and the bottom are parallel. This side will touch with this side if they keep going. They are not parallel. And then you have what's called a kite. It's not a shape we really talk about much, but it's another type of quadrilateral. So the way that this works is that these two sides are the same length and these two sides are the same length, but none of the sides are parallel, okay? Because this side and this side, if you made them go on forever, would touch somewhere over here. And this side, if they went on and on, would touch somewhere over here. All right, so let's take a look at our flow chart here. So all of these shapes are quadrilaterals. So let's kind of take a look at this. Quadrilaterals, we have a kite. So that's that kind of weird shape. We have parallelogram. A lot of our quadrilaterals that we like to talk about are also parallelograms. So if you go down, A rectangle is a type of parallelogram. A rhombus is a type of parallelogram. And then if you keep going through the list, you end up with, finally, at the square. A square is a type of rhombus with 4 right angles. It's a type of rectangle that all sides are the same, and it's a special type of parallelogram. All right, so let's remember, if we can remember what makes these shapes the same. So parallelogram has 2 sets of sets of parallel sides. So that's all you need to be a parallelogram. Okay, now if we go down here to be a rectangle also has 2 sets of parallel sides, but it has 4 right angles. So it can be a parallelogram, but it's a special parallelogram with 4 right angles. Now over here you have the rhombus. The rhombus also has 2 sets of parallel sides. One here, that's a set, and that's a set. But with a rhombus, all sides are the same. So it has 2, I want to type in there, 2 sets of parallel sides, and all sides are the same length. All right, so that makes it a little bit more special than your regular old parallelogram, but maybe not quite as special as a square. So we're working our way down the chart. So parallelogram, this is a special parallelogram. This is a special parallelogram. Now we keep going through and we're going to end up with a square. So a square is what we call the most restrictive. The square has the most requirements. You can't, not just anybody can be a square. A square has to have 2 sets of parallel sides. I'm going to be an expert at spelling parallel. However, I'm not going to be an expert at avoiding typos. 2 sets of parallel sides, 4 right angles, just like a rectangle. But it also has all sides the same, like a rhombus. Okay, so what you could say is you could say that a rectangle or a square is a special rectangle where all the sides are the same. It's also a special rhombus that has 4 right angles. And these are all different types of parallelograms. So this is the least restrictive. All you need to be a parallelogram is to have 2 sets of parallel sides. And then as you go down, you need more things to be these shapes until you get to the most restrictive, which is a square. A square has to have 3 very specific things to be considered a square. But a square can also be considered a rectangle. It can be considered a special rhombus, and it's an extra special parallelogram. And then we have these other shapes. Let's not forget a trapezoid. What makes a trapezoid not a parallelogram? Only 1 set of parallel sides. Okay? Kite, no sets of parallel sides. However, these 2 sides, the sides that touch, are the same. So these 2 sides are the same, and these 2 sides are the same, which quite interestingly is the same thing about rhombus. But that's because all sides are the same. So these 2 sides that touch are the same, and these 2 sides that touch are the same. And that is the hierarchy of our shapes.